The car had 6 seconds left before the machine erased the only proof it had ever existed. That was what Nathan Whitaker saw when the yellow hydraulic crusher began its slow descent over the rusted roof of the $120 coupe, not the dented fenders, not the cloudy rear glass, not the strip of torn red vinyl hanging from the passenger seat like an old bandage, but the thin line of faded blue paint hidden beneath the passenger door where the rust had split open just enough to tell the truth. The crowd at Langford Heritage Auction stood behind the safety rail with plastic champagne cups and phones lifted at chest height, watching the kind of spectacle wealthy people call symbolic when someone else's property is being destroyed. 10 feet from Nathan, Victoria Langford held a silver microphone in one hand and did not look at him when she spoke. "Go ahead," she said to the operator. "Crush it before it embarrasses the lot." Her voice carried cleanly through the outdoor speakers, smooth and practiced, the voice of a woman who had spent her entire adult life being obeyed before she needed to explain herself. Behind her, the Langford Motors banner snapped in the late morning wind, 20 feet wide, white letters on black canvas, announcing a charity auction built around heritage, craftsmanship, and the future of American automotive design. In front of that banner sat 12 restored classics under bright tents, polished so carefully the April sun moved across them like water. Nathan's car did not belong beside them. It had arrived on a flatbed with one tire half flat, a hood that would not latch, and a driver's side mirror held on by tape that had gone gray from weather. The auction staff had laughed when they saw it. One of them asked whether the scrap display was part of the entertainment. Nathan said nothing then, and he said nothing now. He stood with his left hand resting lightly on the shoulder of his 8-year-old daughter, Emily, who held a small red toy car against her chest with both hands. She was wearing white sneakers with grass stains near the soles and a blue jacket missing one button. Her hair had been braided that morning at the kitchen table while Nathan waited for toast to pop up and counted the dollars in his wallet without letting her see him do it. Now she looked at the crusher, then at the coupe, then up at her father. "Dad," she whispered, not asking a full question because she had learned early that some moments were too heavy for full questions. Nathan's eyes stayed on the door seam. 6 seconds was not much time. It was not enough time to explain what hand-shaped aluminum looked like under bad paint, or why old coach builders sometimes sealed prototype panels with primer colors no factory line ever used, or why the curve beneath that rust did not match anything Langford Motors had ever sold to the public. It was only enough time to move. Nathan stepped forward until the security guard lifted one hand to stop him. The machine groaned overhead. Victoria finally turned, irritation tightening the corners of her mouth. Nathan did not raise his voice. He did not beg. He only looked past her at the operator and said, "Stop the press." The laughter came immediately, soft at first, then wider, moving through the crowd like spilled water. Cole Ramsey, the yard manager, smiled with the remote hanging from his hand. "Sir, that thing is worth less than the tow fee." Nathan kept his hand on Emily's shoulder. "Maybe," he said. "But if I'm wrong, you lose 6 seconds. If you're wrong, you lose history." Something in the way he said it made the operator hesitate. The crusher stopped 3 inches above the roof. 6 days earlier, Nathan Whitaker found the coupe behind a row of delivery vans at Mercer County Salvage, sitting half under a torn green tarp that had collected rainwater in the middle and pulled the fabric down until it touched the roof. It was a Thursday afternoon in western Ohio, the kind of afternoon when the sky looked low enough to lean on the telephone wires, and the gravel lot smelled like wet metal, old tires, and oil that had been there longer than anyone wanted to admit. Nathan had not gone there looking for a car. He had gone for a used alternator for a schoolteacher's minivan and a passenger side window motor for a neighbor who paid in cash and zucchini bread. Emily had come with him because her after-school program had closed early for a staff meeting, and she walked beside him in her blue jacket, stepping carefully around puddles while holding the small red toy car she carried almost everywhere. The owner, Ray Mercer, was standing under the office awning with a paper cup of coffee, watching 2 employees sort brake rotors into steel bins. "You need parts, Whitaker, not projects," Ray called when he saw Nathan stop near the tarp. Nathan did not answer right away. He was looking at the shape under the weathered fabric. Most people saw junk by looking at damage first. Nathan had been trained by years of quiet work to look at proportion. Wheelbase. Roofline. The angle where the rear quarter panel met the trunk. Even under the tarp, even under the dirt, something about the car did not sit like a production model. It sat lower, longer, and stranger, as if someone had built it for a future that never arrived. Ray came over, wiping his hand on his jacket. "Storage unit cleanout," he said. "No title history worth chasing. Estate wants it gone. $120 if you tow it today. Monday it goes to scrap." Emily peeked under the tarp before Nathan could stop her. "It used to be red," she said softly. Nathan crouched and lifted the edge. The paint was mostly gone, eaten down to dull primer and bare metal, but near the rocker panel a narrow strip of deep red still held on beneath the grime. Emily held her toy car closer. "It matches mine." Nathan looked at the tires, the broken glass, the sagging headliner, then at the folded bill envelope in his jacket pocket. $120 was not a small amount to him. It was groceries, a utility payment, 2 weeks of gas if he drove carefully. He thought about the electric bill on the kitchen counter and the shoes Emily would need before summer. Then he saw a small rectangular plate beneath the passenger seat track, almost hidden under dust, with letters stamped so shallow they seemed embarrassed to still be there. Marlowe Coachworks. Nathan went very still. Ray misread the silence. "I know, it is ugly. But you could pull a few pieces and get your money back." Nathan lowered the tarp. "I will take it." Ray blinked once, then shrugged like men do when they have already decided another man is making a mistake but the money is real. Owen Miller arrived 20 minutes later with his old tow truck, the one with a cracked amber light on top and a winch that complained every time it worked. He looked at the coupe, then at Nathan. "Tell me there is a reason." Nathan handed him the receipt. "There might be." The tow home was slow. The coupe rolled behind Owen's truck at 20 miles per hour, dripping rainwater from the tarp, looking less like a car than a problem being dragged into the future. At a stoplight, Emily leaned forward from the passenger seat and whispered, "Dad, is it special?" Nathan watched the red light reflected in the cracked windshield behind them. "Maybe," he said. And because he was Nathan Whitaker, he did not say the rest until he could prove it. Nathan Whitaker did not have the kind of life that looked impressive from the street. His house sat on a narrow road outside Dayton, a one-story rental with white siding that had gone dull from weather and a detached garage with a door that stuck every time the air turned damp. There was no sign out front, no business name painted on the window, no row of finished cars waiting under canvas covers. There was only a gravel driveway, a workbench built from old kitchen cabinets, and a man who woke before sunrise because quiet hours were the only ones he fully owned. Every morning, Nathan packed Emily's lunch before he touched a wrench. Peanut butter on wheat bread, apple slices in a plastic container, a folded napkin with one sentence written on it because her mother had started that habit and Nathan had never been able to stop. He braided Emily's hair at the kitchen table with the careful concentration of a man rebuilding something delicate and irreplaceable. Some mornings the braid came out uneven. Emily never complained. She would reach back, touch it once, and say, "Looks good, Dad," with the loyalty of a child who already understood more than he wished she had to understand. Her mother, Claire, had been gone for 3 years. Heart failure, sudden and quiet, 1 week after Emily's 5th birthday. The hospital had used gentle voices and precise language. Nathan remembered almost none of it. He remembered the shape of Emily's hand inside his. He remembered the vending machine coffee. He remembered driving home with an empty passenger seat and a child asleep in the back, still wearing the paper bracelet from the family waiting room. After that, grief became part of the house, not loud enough to stop the day, but present in small places. In the second coffee mug he still reached for sometimes. In the blue sweater folded on the top shelf of the closet. In the way Emily kept her red toy car on the windowsill beside her bed because Claire had bought it from a gas station on the last road trip they took as a family. Nathan had once worked restoration for Halden Classic Works, a private shop that handled cars most people only saw in magazines or museum photographs. He had been good at it, not in the flashy way that made clients remember his name, but in the quiet way that made other mechanics leave difficult problems on his bench. He could read old metal by touch. He could hear when a carburetor was lying. He knew the difference between factory symmetry and human intention, between a body panel pressed by a machine and one shaped by a person who had stood over it with patience and a hammer. But restoration shops liked long hours, sudden travel, and men who could stay late without checking whether a babysitter had cancelled. After Claire died, Nathan lasted 4 months before the math of fatherhood made the decision for him. He left without a scene, took the tools he had paid for himself, and built a smaller life behind a smaller house. It paid less. It gave him evenings. That mattered more. By the time Owen Miller backed the old tow truck into the driveway with the $120 coupe hanging behind it, Nathan already knew the neighbors would notice. They always noticed things that looked like failure. Mrs. Kepler paused with her garden hose still running. A teenage boy across the street lifted his phone. Someone laughed from a porch 2 houses down. Nathan heard it all and carried none of it into his face. Emily stood beside the garage, clutching her toy car, watching the real one settle onto the gravel with a tired creak. Owen climbed out, looked at the rusted body, and lowered his voice. "You sure about this?" Nathan stepped toward the coupe and brushed rainwater off the passenger door with his sleeve. Beneath the dirt, the faint blue line showed again, thin as a secret. "No," he said. Then he opened the garage door by hand and added, "But I know where to start." That night, after Emily fell asleep with her red toy car tucked under the edge of her pillow, Nathan went back to the garage and turned on the single hanging light above the workbench. The bulb flickered twice before settling into a steady yellow glow. Outside, rain tapped softly against the aluminum gutters, and the neighborhood slipped into the kind of quiet that makes small sounds feel larger than they are. Nathan stood beside the coupe for a full minute without touching it. He had learned a long time ago that damaged things told the truth slowly. If you rushed them, you only heard what you expected to hear. The car sat crooked on the jack stands, its tired tires off the ground, its rusted body wearing the light in uneven patches. Most men would have started with the engine. Nathan started with the body. He ran his fingertips along the passenger side quarter panel, not pressing hard, just enough to feel what the eye could miss. The metal was not stamped. That was the first real answer. A factory panel from that era had a rhythm to it, even in its imperfections, a repeated mechanical consistency left by dies, pressure, and production speed. This panel had none of that. Its surface carried tiny variations, almost too subtle to see, but clear under the skin of his fingers. Someone had shaped it by hand. Someone patient. Someone who cared about a curve no customer would ever notice unless he already knew where to look. Nathan opened a drawer and pulled out a soft cloth, a plastic scraper, and a bottle of mild solvent. He did not use anything harsh. Old paint was like old paper. It remembered more than people thought, but it punished carelessness. He worked under the passenger door first, where the thin blue line had shown through. Dirt lifted. Then old wax. Then a layer of dull red. Beneath that, protected in a seam where weather had not reached completely, was a narrow strip of pale blue primer that did not belong to the visible car at all. Nathan stopped. He wiped the area again, slower. Blue-gray. Experimental shops had used colors like that to mark test bodies before final paint, especially when the car was never meant for public sale. He set the cloth down and reached for his notebook. He wrote one line, blue-gray primer under red repaint, passenger lower seam. He did not write what he hoped it meant. Hope made poor evidence. Next he moved inside. The door opened with a tired groan, and a faint smell of dust, mice, and old vinyl rolled into the garage. Nathan removed the torn floor mat, lifted the brittle carpet near the passenger seat, and found the small rectangular plate he had glimpsed at Mercer County Salvage. Marlowe Coachworks. The letters were shallow but clean, stamped into aluminum, held by two tiny rivets that had not been replaced. His breathing changed, but only slightly. Marlowe Coachworks had not built ordinary cars. They had built bodies, prototypes, special commissions, the kind of quiet work that disappeared behind bigger names on polished badges. In the 1960s, companies like Langford Motors had sent unfinished frames to specialty shops when they wanted something unusual made quickly and privately. Nathan reached for his phone, then stopped. He was not ready to call anyone. Not yet. He checked the firewall, the door jamb, the rear axle mount. Every place a production car should have spoken clearly, this one spoke in fragments. A partial number under flaking paint. A welded bracket that looked hand-fitted. A steering column mount that had been modified twice. Near midnight, he slid beneath the car on a cracked mechanic's creeper and aimed his flashlight at the inner frame rail. Oil, road dust, and surface rust covered everything. He cleaned 1 inch, then another. At first, there was nothing. Then the edge of a letter appeared. Nathan held the light closer. MCW. He cleaned more. X12. His hand went still under the car. For almost 10 seconds, the only sound in the garage was rain. Then, from the doorway, Emily's sleepy voice said, "Dad?" Nathan turned his head. She stood there in pajama pants and one sock, holding the red toy car against her chest. "Is the old car sick?" Nathan looked back at the hidden marking on the frame, then at his daughter. He smiled, but only a little. "No," he said. "I think it has been waiting for somebody to listen." By Friday morning, Nathan had slept for 2 hours and written 14 lines in his notebook, none of them long enough to explain what the car might be and all of them too specific to ignore. MCW, X12. Blue-gray primer under red repaint. Hand-shaped passenger quarter. Modified steering column mount. Marlowe Coachworks plate original rivets. He read the lines twice while standing at the kitchen counter, waiting for Emily's oatmeal to cool. She sat at the table in her school uniform, moving her red toy car around a folded napkin like it was driving through mountains. Nathan had not told her what he found. He had not told Owen either. A thing did not become true because a man wanted it badly enough. It became true when it survived being checked. After he dropped Emily at school, Nathan called the Langford Heritage Auction Office because the event listing said they accepted private vehicle evaluations on site before Saturday afternoon. He did not ask for special treatment. He gave his name, the year listed on the salvage receipt, and the stamped marking he had found on the frame. The receptionist put him on hold for 9 minutes, then came back with a voice that had changed from polite to dismissive. "Sir, if the car does not have a clean title, we cannot include it in any formal auction review. You may bring photographs for general advice, but we do not appraise scrap." Nathan looked through the garage window at the coupe sitting under the hanging light. "I am not asking you to appraise scrap," he said. "I am asking you to look at a frame mark." There was a pause. Then she said the public lot opened at 10 on Saturday, and if he wanted to waste his own tow fee, that was his choice. Nathan thanked her. By noon the next day, Owen's tow truck was rolling through the entrance of the Langford event grounds with the coupe strapped behind it. The place looked nothing like Mercer County Salvage. White tents stood in 2 perfect rows across a paved exhibition yard outside Columbus. Black banners rose from polished steel poles. A camera crew moved between restored cars with shoulder rigs and cables. Guests wore linen jackets, sunglasses, and shoes that had never crossed a muddy driveway. At the center of the yard was the crusher, painted bright yellow, staged beside a sign that read "Old Metal, New Future." It was not there for necessity. It was there for theater. Langford Motors had built a public relations campaign around removing what Victoria Langford called hopeless inventory from America's restoration pipeline. The cars chosen for crushing had already been stripped, documented, and declared unworthy by her staff. The crowd loved it because destruction looks clean when someone else has done the accounting. Nathan stepped out of Owen's truck in a faded gray work shirt and jeans with a grease mark near one knee. Emily climbed down after him, holding her toy car and staying close to his side. A young staff member with a tablet approached, looked at the coupe, then looked at Nathan as if she had been handed a problem too strange to categorize. "Sir, vendor drop-off is on the west side." Nathan shook his head. "I am here for evaluation." The staff member's eyes moved to the cracked windshield, the torn tarp, the dead front tire. Before she could answer, Cole Ramsey walked over from the crusher platform. He was broad, sunburned, and smiling before anyone had said anything funny. "Evaluation," he said, loud enough for two nearby guests to hear. "Of that?" The guests turned. One lifted a phone. Nathan reached into his jacket and removed the folded salvage receipt and the photograph of the frame mark he had printed at home because paper could not run out of battery. Cole did not take either one. "Buddy, this is a heritage event, not a rescue shelter for bad decisions." Emily's fingers tightened around her toy car. Nathan noticed. His face did not change. Then Victoria Langford arrived, moving through the space with a microphone in her hand and a small group of staff behind her. She wore a cream-colored blazer, dark glasses, and the particular calm of someone who expected the world to arrange itself before she reached it. Cole leaned toward her and said something Nathan could not hear. Victoria looked at the coupe once. Only once. "Is this part of the approved crush list?" she asked. Cole smiled wider. "It can be." A few people laughed. Victoria turned toward the camera crew, then back toward Nathan. "Then let us make it useful." Victoria turned slightly toward the camera crew, and the man holding the main rig adjusted his stance as if he understood this was the moment the event had been built to capture. Behind him, the live stream monitor showed Nathan, Emily, the rusted coupe, and the yellow crusher in one clean frame. The image was almost too perfect for the story Victoria wanted to tell. A polished company. A hopeless car. A working man who had mistaken attachment for value. She lifted the microphone toward her mouth and smiled without warmth. "Every year, thousands of vehicles are dragged from barns, yards, and storage lots by people who believe rust is the same thing as history," she said. "It is not. Real heritage is documented. Real value is proven. And sometimes the most responsible thing we can do is clear space for what deserves to survive." A few guests clapped because they knew when applause was expected. Nathan looked at the coupe. Emily looked at the ground. Cole Ramsey walked to the flatbed and began loosening the straps before Owen stepped forward. "Hold on," Owen said. "That car is not yours to move." Cole glanced at Victoria, then back at him. "Then your friend can move it out, or we can help him learn what a bad decision looks like when it gets smaller." More laughter came from near the tents. Nathan heard a woman whisper that it was sad when men could not let go of junk. He heard a man say the little girl should not have to watch her father embarrass himself. That one reached him differently. It did not show on his face, but Emily felt his hand settle gently between her shoulders, steady as a roof beam. Victoria stepped closer. "Mr. Whitaker, was it?" Nathan nodded. "You have been told this vehicle is not eligible for review. You have no title chain, no auction certification, and no appointment with our senior appraisers. You brought a scrap car into a curated event and expected professionals to pause for a guess." Nathan reached into his jacket and held out the printed photograph of the frame marking. "I expected someone to read this." Victoria did not take it. Cole leaned in, looked at the paper for half a second, and smiled. "Letters and numbers under a dead car. That is not provenance." Nathan folded the paper once, carefully, along the crease that was already there. He did not answer Cole. He looked at Victoria. "Give me 10 minutes with the frame before you crush it." The request was so calm that for a moment nobody responded. Then Victoria let out a small breath, not quite a laugh, not quite patience. 10 minutes. Nathan nodded. Under the passenger rail. I need to clean the rest of the stamp. Cole shook his head. This is ridiculous. But Victoria had already seen the phones lifted around her, the camera pointed at Nathan, the live stream comments climbing on the monitor. She understood attention. She understood humiliation. And she believed she knew which way this one would fall. Fine, she said. 10 minutes. Then it goes in. Cole made a show of checking his watch. Starting now. Nathan did not rush. That bothered people more than panic would have. He asked Owen for the small canvas tool roll from the truck, then walked to the coupe and knelt beside the passenger side. The pavement was warm through his jeans. The crowd shifted for a better angle. Emily stood behind the safety rail with both hands around her toy car, watching her father work the way she had watched him fix sinks, bicycles, minivans, and once the broken zipper on her backpack before school. He slid partly beneath the car, opened the tool roll, and chose a plastic scraper, a soft brass brush, and a rag dampened with solvent. Cole called out, 8 minutes. Nathan did not look at him. He cleaned 1 inch of the frame rail, then another. Rust dust fell onto the pavement. A camera moved closer. Victoria stood with the microphone lowered, her expression composed, though her eyes had narrowed slightly. 6 minutes, Cole said. Nathan found the M first. Then the C. Then the W. The same letters he had seen in his garage, only now the stamp continued farther beneath the grime. He cleaned slowly, because old metal punished impatience. 4 minutes. The X appeared. Then the 1. Then the 2. Nathan shifted the light from Owen's phone and wiped the lower edge of the rail. There was more. Not much, but enough. A slash. Then letters hidden under oil and time. Langford Experimental Division. Nathan stopped moving. For the first time all morning, the crowd quieted without being told. Victoria looked at the frame, then at Nathan. Her microphone hand lowered another inch. Cole's smile weakened. Emily whispered, "Dad." Nathan slid out from under the coupe, holding the rag in one hand. He stood slowly, grease on his sleeve, calm in his eyes, and said, "You should call someone who remembers 1964. The words did not land all at once. For most of the crowd, 1964 was only a year, distant and flat, something printed on museum cards and anniversary posters. For Victoria Langford, it was different. Her father had been born in 1931, had taken over Langford Motors when Detroit was changing faster than anyone could predict, and had spent the early 1960s trying to build something the board kept telling him was too personal, too expensive, too strange for the American market. She knew the stories in fragments. A private design shop. A lost prototype. A family argument that became company silence. But those stories belonged to framed photographs and speeches given at donor dinners, not to a rusted coupe sitting under a crusher in front of a live audience. Victoria stared at the exposed letters on the frame rail, and for the first time since Nathan had arrived, she did not seem certain which expression her face should hold. Cole Ramsey stepped closer, eager to fill the quiet before it turned against him. "Could be anything," he said. "Could be somebody stamped that last week." Nathan looked at him once, not offended, not defensive, simply registering the sentence and letting it fall. Then he took out his phone. Opened a contact he had added the night before but had not dared to use, and pressed call. The name on the screen was Harold Bennett. Owen saw it and lifted his eyebrows. Nathan had found Harold through an old restoration directory after tracing Marlowe Coachworks through 3 archived forum posts, a scanned trade journal, and a photograph of a young man standing beside an unfinished body shell in 1965. Harold Bennett had been 22 in that photograph. He had swept floors at Marlowe, filed work orders, carried panels, and listened when older men thought nobody important was in the room. The phone rang 4 times. Victoria looked as if she wanted to stop this, but the live stream camera was still pointed at her, and the silence around the crusher had become too delicate to break without sounding afraid. On the 5th ring, an old man answered. Bennett. Nathan put the phone on speaker. Mr. Bennett, this is Nathan Whitaker. I sent you photographs last night of the Marlowe plate and the MCW X12 marking. There was a pause, and in that pause the whole event seemed to lean closer. Where are you now? Harold asked. His voice was thin with age but sharp underneath. Langford Heritage Auction outside Columbus. Another pause. Shorter this time. Is the car still intact? Nathan looked at the crusher hanging 3 inches over the roof. For the moment. Harold's breathing changed audibly through the speaker. Do not let them move it. Do not let anyone cut, sand, repaint, polish or start that car until the inner hood panel is checked. Victoria's hand tightened around the microphone. This is Victoria Langford, she said, stepping toward the phone. If you have information relevant to my company's property history, you can direct it to our archive department. Harold gave a quiet sound that was not a laugh. Miss Langford, your archive department lost this car before you were old enough to read. The crowd did not move. Even Cole stopped smiling. Victoria's eyes sharpened, not with anger now, but with recognition that something had entered the yard that she could not manage by tone alone. What car? She asked. Harold exhaled slowly. If the stamp reads MCW X12 and the lower rail says Langford Experimental Division, then you are looking at the Marlowe 12. Your father commissioned it in 1964, off books, after the board rejected his personal sports coupe project. Only one rolling body was completed. It disappeared during the Dayton warehouse transfer in 1972. Nathan turned toward the coupe. The rusted hood was still pinned at one corner by a bent latch. He walked to it, worked his fingers under the edge, and lifted with careful pressure until the old metal released. It opened only halfway. Owen stepped in without being asked and held it steady. Beneath the hood, the inside panel was covered in grime, mouse tracks, and flaking red overspray. Nathan took the damp rag and began to wipe the center section in slow circles. Victoria came closer despite herself. Emily slipped under the rope and stood beside Nathan's leg, silent, her toy car pressed against her coat. At first, there was nothing. Then a line appeared under the dirt. Not stamped. Written by hand in faded white marker, protected for decades by darkness and neglect. Nathan wiped once more. The sentence came clear enough for everyone near the car to read. For V.L., when she is old enough to drive. Victoria stopped so suddenly that Cole almost bumped into her. The microphone lowered to her side. Harold Bennett's voice came through the phone, softer now. Elliot wrote that himself. No one clapped. No one laughed. The wind moved the black Langford banner behind her, and for the first time all morning, Victoria Langford looked at the ruined car as if it had spoken her name. For several seconds, the only sound in the auction yard was the low idle of the generator feeding power to the lights, the cameras, and the machine that had nearly erased the car from the world. Victoria stood with the microphone hanging at her side, her eyes fixed on the sentence beneath the hood as if she could make it change by refusing to blink. For V.L., when she is old enough to drive. The letters were uneven, slightly tilted, written by a man who had not been thinking about investors, market share, or quarterly projections when he made them. He had been thinking about a little girl who would one day become old enough to sit behind a steering wheel. Victoria had seen her father's handwriting in birthday cards, old engineering notes, and the framed letter in the lobby of Langford headquarters, but never like this. Never hidden beneath grime on a car she had almost turned into scrap for a public relations moment. Nathan stepped back from the hood and gave her room without making a show of it. He did not say he told her so. He did not look at the crowd. He wiped his hands on the rag and set it carefully on the edge of the fender, away from the writing. Emily stood beside him, still holding her toy car, and looked from her father to Victoria with the serious quiet of a child trying to understand why grown-ups sometimes become silent all at once. Harold Bennett remained on speaker, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its sharpness. Elliot Langford wanted that car built without the board interfering. Marlowe handled the body. Langford Experimental handled the frame and drivetrain planning. The project was never assigned a public model code. Internally, we called it the 12 because it was the 12th private development file that year. Victoria swallowed once. It was a small movement, but the camera caught it. Why was it not in our archive, she asked. Harold took a long breath. Because after your father died, the company cleaned out the Dayton warehouse in a hurry. Some crates went to storage. Some went to vendors. Some were mislabeled. That car was supposed to be protected. It was not. Cole Ramsey looked down at the remote in his hand as if it had become heavier. Behind him, the live stream monitor kept rolling. Comments moved too quickly to read, but no one in the yard needed to read them. The story had shifted in front of everyone. A minute earlier, Nathan had been the man wasting time. Now he was the only person there who had taken the time to look. Victoria turned toward the operator. "Power it down," she said. Her voice was quieter than before. The operator reached for the controls, and the crusher's engine wound down into silence. That silence did more than any speech could have done. It crossed the yard, moved through the polished tents, settled over the champagne tables and the restored cars waiting under perfect lights. People who had laughed looked away from Nathan. The woman who had whispered about junk lowered her phone. Owen stood beside the flatbed with his arms folded, not smiling, because some moments were too clean to decorate. Harold asked Nathan to check the rear bulkhead, the left hinge pocket, and the underside of the dash for secondary markings. Nathan did each one slowly, with Victoria watching every movement. The rear bulkhead held a chalk number sealed beneath old clear coat. The hinge pocket had a Marlowe inspection stamp. Beneath the dash, wrapped in brittle tape, Nathan found a small metal tag with Elliot Langford's initials and a date from June 1964. Harold went quiet when Nathan read it aloud. Then he said, "That is enough to stop every appraiser in the country from sleeping tonight." Victoria closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them, she was no longer looking at the car as an embarrassment, a liability, or a useful symbol. She was looking at the last unfinished promise her father had left behind. Nathan lifted Emily gently back over the rope and turned to cover the exposed writing from the sun with a clean cloth. Victoria watched him do it, and the shame on her face was not loud, but it was there. The man she had dismissed had protected her father's work more carefully in 10 minutes than her company had in 50 years. The first appraiser arrived before sunset, driving in from Indianapolis with 2 assistants, a rolling camera kit, and the careful expression of a man who understood that being early to history was better than being loud about it. By then, Langford Heritage Auction no longer felt like an event. It felt like a room where someone had said the wrong thing and everyone was waiting to see who would admit it first. The tents were still standing, the polished cars were still under lights, and the champagne tables had not moved, but the laughter was gone. Victoria Langford had ended the live stream without a closing statement. Cole Ramsey had disappeared toward the equipment office and did not come back. Nathan stayed near the coupe with Emily and Owen, not because anyone asked him to guard it, but because leaving it alone after what had nearly happened felt wrong. When the appraiser crouched beside the frame rail and read MCW X12 with his own flashlight, he did not speak for almost 15 seconds. Then he asked for the hood to be raised again. Nathan lifted it carefully. The man looked at the writing beneath the panel, then at the Marlowe plate, then at the secondary tag under the dash. His face changed in the smallest possible way, but Nathan saw it. So did Victoria. "Preliminary estimate," the appraiser said at last, assuming authentication confirms what I am seeing, would begin at $6.2 million. No one in the circle moved. Emily looked up at Nathan, trying to understand the size of a number that large. Nathan did not smile. He only put his hand gently on the back of her head. Victoria stood across from him with both hands folded in front of her, her cream blazer no longer spotless near one sleeve where it had brushed the old hood. For the first time all day, she looked less like the owner of the yard and more like a daughter standing beside something she had almost lost. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, and the title sounded different now. "I would like to buy it." Nathan looked at the car, not at the appraiser, not at the cameras, not at the people pretending not to listen. He thought of the electric bill on his kitchen counter, Emily's summer shoes, the hospital envelope stacked in a drawer he opened only when he had to. $6.2 million could change every ordinary pressure in his life. It could give Emily a college fund, a paid-off house, a future where every decision did not begin with subtraction. Victoria seemed to know that. "Name your price," she said quietly. Nathan was silent long enough for the offer to become uncomfortable. Then he said, "It deserves to be restored before it is owned." Victoria blinked. Nathan continued, his voice even. "Publicly. Documented from the first bolt to the last coat of paint. The people who built it get named. Marlowe Coachworks gets named. Elliot Langford gets named for the work, not the brand. And the restoration is done by hands that understand what it is, not by a marketing department trying to clean up a mistake." The appraiser glanced at Victoria. Owen looked down at the gravel, hiding the faintest smile. Emily leaned against Nathan's side. Victoria's face tightened, then softened into something more difficult than pride. "And after that?" she asked. Nathan looked at his daughter's red toy car, still clutched in her hands. "After that, it goes to auction. A real one. Part of the proceeds fund restoration scholarships for children of mechanics, fabricators, and shop workers who did not get the kind of name people put on buildings." Victoria absorbed the condition without answering right away. Behind her, the yellow crusher sat powered down, its arm raised uselessly above empty pavement. It looked smaller now. She nodded once. Not because she had one. Because for once, winning was not available to her. 3 months later, the Marlowe 12 sat inside a glass-walled restoration studio in Dayton, stripped, measured, photographed, and protected. Nathan led the work. Harold Bennett came twice a week with old notes and shaking hands. Emily did homework at a small table near the office window. Victoria visited often, never with cameras at first. On the day the first restored panel caught the light, she stood beside Nathan and said, "I thought value was something I could recognize from a distance." Nathan wiped his hands on a clean rag. "Most people do," he said. Emily looked up from her notebook. "Are we still poor, Dad?" Nathan looked at the car, then at his daughter, then at the men and women in the shop whose names were finally being written down. "No," he said softly. "We were never poor in the parts that mattered." Victoria did not respond. She only looked through the glass at the car her father had left for her, and for the first time, she seemed to understand that Nathan had not saved it from the crusher because it was worth millions. He had saved it because it was worth listening to.